Memory,
the CTO of Ariane Space.
Top technical person. You're going to be hearing next from the Launch Operations Manager and the Mission Director all about the launcher campaign for Flight 200.
Well, it is indeed a specific campaign because it is the 200th Ariane launch. It started very early, immediately after Flight 197 last year.
These hard-working teams were involved with assembly of the Ariane 5 since October of last year. They took advantage of the lessons learned from the first ATV flight. This saved time where work on the passenger was concerned. Flight 200, however, had certain restrictions, like all Ariane launches preceding it.
We started with the preparation of ground facilities and of the launcher, and went on till the ATV-2 reached the BAF. We also worked between Christmas and New Year to be ready to receive Johannes Kepler ATV-2.
ATV-2 has a special cargo access device to load last-minute items. It's the first time the European Space Agency has used such an element. Over 400 kilograms will be loaded through the International Space Station hatch, with the ATV in the vertical position atop Ariane 5. This gives flexibility in adapting the cargo to the needs of the space station.
Last-minute freight integration allows NASA to integrate the equipment necessary for the station as late as possible, knowing that nominally most of the freight is integrated 3 months before launch. Entering the module generates access constraints in terms of cleanliness and contamination. The European Space Agency implements procedures to make sure the operator's environment is fully compliant when he goes down into the module.
Another restriction, this launch is programmed for a fixed liftoff time, no launch window.
The last phase, that is the transfer of the launch vehicle to the launch pad, followed by filling, requires full compliance with the schedule because tonight we have no launch window.
After completing its final checks, Ariane 5 was given the green light to move to the launch zone. This transfer is done the day before liftoff. Riding on the launch table specially conceived for it, Ariane makes her way slowly on the rail track, pulled by a special truck to its position on the launch pad. Here, it awaits the final countdown. And Ariane 5 awaiting the final countdown on this very cooperative effort tonight from all the European partners and beyond, and we'll be hearing from all of them later on. But for now, Alex, the very green status panels.
Yes, so tonight we all hope that it'll stay green until the liftoff time. So again, the panel showing the health status and readiness status of not only the launcher itself, but also the ATV and all the different means of the launch base which are participating to the launch tonight.
Space base is a big one, and all these services, downrange, telemetry, safety, the satellites, weather, all of them, sending their information here into Jupiter Mission Control, which is why we call it the nerve center of the space base. And they come into 2 gentlemen, whom you're about to see, the mission director and the DDO, the range operations manager. And there's the mission director.
So Jean-Marc and Damien, who are the key persons of the launch campaign. They are coordinating all the operations all throughout the launch campaign.
À tous, le DDO. Attention pour la séquence finale lanceur.
The DDO, who calls out the milestones in the campaign, is going to call out the final automatic sequence at 7 minutes.
Top H0 moins 7 minutes.
All right, there we are. We made it into the final sequence, also called the automated or automatic sequence. These are the final moments, I guess, of final countdown. Looking here into the program director area, Alex.
Yes, Christophe Bardou. Just some word on the automatic sequence. From now on, any activation of the launcher or any ground system is totally automatic and decided by the computers.
Under the fairing tonight, 20 tons. The ATV, the second of 6 or 7 ATVs going towards the space station. Basically a cylinder 10 meters by 4.5 meters, 22 meters with the solar panels deployed. That comes at the very end of the mission, about an hour from now. In two parts, basically, there's a service module and a cargo module. Service module with the propulsion systems, avionics, and also, I believe, some of the propulsion in there. Propellants, I should say.
Propellants, yes.
And the cargo, of course, bringing up needed items to and supplies to the ISS. 20 tons in all. Shot of Jupiter. Jupiter's in two parts. There's the operationals. Here are the program directors. This is your job, actually, isn't it?
This is, yes, the program director, Christophe. And here his counterparts from ATV, Charlotte and Nico Detman, the DMS. Christophe's work is the program director. He's handling the contracts from signature up to the launch.
Dealing with the customer. You're the customer interface.
He's the customer's interface for Ariane Space.
And that is your job. So you start on a new contract, 18 months before liftoff?
For a normal telecommunication satellite, it takes about 18 months to prepare for a launch. Of course, for a scientific satellite, it may take much longer.
That's a little different, yeah. And then, of course, you have all the reviews after launch and everything.
Yes, we have a very accurate and detailed analysis of all the flight data before the next launch is taking place.
So you're very busy. So I'm glad you took time to do the broadcast.
I'm always very busy. Thank you to remind me that, Josh.
We saw under the fairing. Take a look, Alex, and read off some of the figures on the launch vehicle itself.
Yeah, the two big boosters, which are manufactured here in Kourou, prepared and assembled here in Kourou. The main stage, main cryogenic stage, the big stage with the cryogenic propellants. And the upper stage EPS, we'll talk a little bit more about this stage later. And on top of the EPS, the VEB, the brains of the launcher, with all the electronics and onboard computer, and ATV enveloped by the fairing, the long fairing.
All right, coming up on 4 minutes. This is roughly where we got stuck last night, at 4 minutes and 1 second exactly.
Yes, now we've passed the pressurization of the propellant tanks, so the filling process has been stopped.
We had a last-minute weather check at 10 minutes, didn't we, Alex? And they gave us a green for the weather?
Yes, we had a green already at when it's 20 minutes, and we'll have we had the last weather report at when it's 10 minutes, which was green as well.
It was raining earlier in the day, but you can see the sky has cleared considerably, and we should have fine weather for launch. We should have some fine pictures at liftoff on this very first launch of the year. Up at the Launch Control Center, what's going on?
The Launch Control Center is now under the heading of Klaus Zell, our Launch Operations Manager. He's conducting the Ariane Space Launch Team and conducting the last operations and monitoring everything which is going on, happening on the launch vehicle.
They monitor all the checks that take Ariane down to liftoff, not beyond. Is that right?
Yes, they monitor all what's happening on the launcher and all the information coming from the different checks.
Now, how many people are up there? I know there are 3 teams. How many people?
Around 150 people, maybe 200, including all the people in charge of the ground installations maintenance.
I think there are 3 teams basically up there, coordinating the campaign and the countdown, guaranteeing flight readiness.
Yeah, there may be even 2 teams preparing for 2 different launch campaigns, because we can prepare a launcher for the next flight and while being about to finish the campaign of the previous one.
All that taking place about 14 kilometers away from here, where we are in Jupiter. You can see Ariane on the pad. Coming up on 2 minutes, we're still green. That's the color we want.
Green, which is very good news.
What's happening now?
Now, what's happening is that we have the very last operations on the launch vehicle, which will progressively become totally autonomous from the ground systems.
This is what basically happens during the synchronized sequence from the 7 minutes down to liftoff is power. Am I right in saying power passes from the ground control over to autonomous onboard computer control?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that is what's happening now. If we bring the camera back into Jupiter, you'll see people starting to wander out onto the terraces. There they are. They're going out. There are 2 terraces on either side of us here, observation decks, and the VIPs and invited guests go out there usually about this time, and they have a bird's eye view of the launcher lifting off, passing right over our heads. on her way. The DDO will call out the 1 minute mark in just a moment, and we'll be into the final 60 seconds of Flight 200.
À tous de DDO, attention pour H0 moins 1 minute. Top H0 moins 1 minute.
All right, we're into the final 60 seconds of the first launch of the year. Remember, you can follow all the action on the website. You have the address right there. The ignition sequence, tell us about that, Alex. You'll hear the DDO call out allumage,
yes,
which is ignition.
You'll see the flame under the main engine, Vulcan. So we shall ignite the engine and check it for 7 seconds.
That's the main engine.
That's the main engine. And when everything's fine and with the check is okay, then the ignition of the boosters and the actual liftoff.
Okay, so you get main engine lights up first, computers check out for 7 seconds, all the pressure, testing it on the ground, and then the boosters go. We'll let the DDO, we'll call out the final countdown, and be back after Ariane has cleared the tower.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, unité. Top, allumage Vulcain. Confirmé. Top, allumage EAP, décollage. Les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
Beautiful there. Ariane off on her way with just a 24-hour delay, leaving a trail of gold as she rises into the sky over French Guiana at 18:51 local time and right on time. Ariane began her mission.
And right on time. So we had a mass at liftoff of 773 tons, including 554 tons for the sole boosters. The boosters which give a very strong initial acceleration that will increase velocity from 0 to 7,200 kilometers per hour in about 2.3 minutes. That's 4,500 miles per hour. So after booster separation, which will occur in about 2 minutes, the launcher will have lost about 75% of its liftoff mass. The boosters will fall down into the Atlantic Ocean in a zone which has been secured by an international advice to maritime navigation.
Ariane burning now 5 tons of fuel per second. That's 2.5 tons in each booster per second. The EPC, also the core stage, as it's called, is burning another 300 kilos of fuel per second. All that adds up to roughly the equivalent of a dozen Airbuses. She's now following the program in the onboard computer, which gives all the orders, including stage separations, which we will soon see. 4 powered flight phases tonight. We're in the first one, the main engine, and the boosters, as Alex said, they're going to burn for another maybe 20 seconds. Alex, take a look on the left, the upper left screen. Can you give us a description of the curve, please?
Yeah, we see the simulated flight trajectory, which is computed by using very accurate mathematical models of the launcher and the ATV, and by application, of course, of the Keplerian laws for the ballistic phase.
Which we're going to hear about a little later.
Yeah, a little later.
All 3 of them.
So the Mach, which follows...
DDO has just called out the separation of the boosters. You can see what that looks like. There's another one out of camera range on the left, but they fall back down right on time at about 64 kilometers up, I think. They fall away from the shore. People streaming back in from the terraces, you can see in the background there.
Yes, now to follow the actual flight. And now we're expecting the fairing separation.
That's the next milestone.
Minutes.
You can see the cursor crawling up on the upper left. I don't know if you can read it. SEP-QUAF, it says separation of the fairing. On the lower left, Alex, can you describe what the bottom lines are?
Yes, we have the real-time information from the launcher of the velocity and the altitude, and also the angle of the telemetry antenna with respect to horizontal.
So you see the altitude. The altitude is 102 kilometers. That's the second line. So we're above the atmosphere, which is where we can separate the fairing, and the DDO will call out that milestone in a moment. We are in the second.
Largage de la coiffe.
There it is. Largage.
There it is. So we don't need the protection of the fairing anymore. We have crossed the atmospheric layers, and then now we don't need these 2 tons weight anymore.
They're actually 2 halves, 1 half like one of the boosters before was out of.
Yeah, it's cut vertically and
range.
horizontally.
Everything is perfect on board, says the DDO. The ATV now under the fairing, exposed to the elements. And we're going to go now to the next part of the broadcast, which is the latest news from Ariane space, and there is a lot of it. So take a look. Ariane ended 2010 in style with its 6th successful launch on December 29th, delivering 2 telecommunication satellites, Hispasat-1E for Spain and KoreaSat-6 for South Korea. It was the 41st straight successful mission for the European launch vehicle. 2010 was a big year for Ariane space, with 12 contracts signed for Ariane and 7 for Soyuz. In all, 6 successful launches for a total of 12 satellites. 2011 promises to be as big, with Soyuz and Vega bringing their launch services to the space base. Tokyo, January 19th. During the EJBRT roundtable of Japanese and European industrialists, Jean-Yves Le Gall met with Japan's Prime Minister, Naoto Kan. The meeting underscored strengthening cooperation between Europe and Japan in matters of space research and in commercial space. Eutelsat has signed with Ariane Space to launch one of its new satellites in 2012. This is the 26th contract between the 2 partners. Jean-Yves Le Gall and Dr. Volker Liebig of the European Space Agency also signed for launch of Sentinel-1A, an environmental monitoring satellite, for December of next year. Baikonur, January 28th. The Soyuz once again successfully lifted off from the Kazakhstan base. It was launch number 1,766 of the legendary vehicle. Meanwhile, here in French Guiana, Soyuz is preparing for her maiden voyage.
This is Mission Control Houston with an update on the situation. The crew on board the International Space Station, Commander Scott Kelly of Expedition 26, calling down to spacecraft communicator Rick Sturko. He had a tally-ho on the ATV-2 launch from the launch complex at Kourou, French Guiana. So far, everything looking very good as launch proceeds on track right now. We're so far 5 minutes and 55 seconds into the launch. We have should have seen a rocket fairing separation of the ATV-2 by this point. And the next activity on the timeline is the main cryogenic stage's engine cutoff coming up here at 3:59 p.m. and 47 seconds. Just a few seconds from now. Following that will be the upper stage ignition of the second stage at 4 p.m. Central Time. And then that will burn for about 8 minutes and 12 seconds until it cuts off. All systems looking really good on the ATV-2 launch, and the International Space Station had a bird's eye view of that. In addition to the flight control team here, we have a couple of operations leads from the Houston Support Group at the Launch Control Center in Toulouse, France. Michael Way is the HSG Ops lead, and Ed Grovera is the HSG Automated Rendezvous Specialist, who are watching from the control center in Toulouse as the flight control team continues to monitor the progress of ATV-2 and its 7 tons of cargo headed toward the International Space Station at a fast clip.
The control center in Toulouse made contact with the ATV-2. Then separation can occur. On its own, the ATV will circle the Earth for a week before catching up with the space station 22,000 kilometers ahead of it. It'll then have reached an altitude of 350 kilometers and be ready to dock. You heard Alexei in the film talking about the Santa Maria ground station. That's an ESA tracking station, rather new one, joined the system in 2008. Not used a lot, but it was used for ESA's Envisat, which was launched by Ariane in 2002, Flight 145. And it's going to be used also to receive launcher telemetry for the upcoming Galileo GPS launches on Ariane or Soyuz from the space station. The DDO has just called out the extinction of the lower stage and the separation of the lower stage. You can see what that looks like up there.
Waiting for the ignition of the upper stage.
The first upper stage burn.
Allumage de l'EPS.
There it is. He's called it out.
There
right
it
on
is.
Time. Those are 3 commands given by the onboard computer: extinction of the lower stage, separation of the lower stage, ignition upper stage in about 12 or 13 seconds. Now this is everything normal. He says the first ignition will burn for about 8 minutes. There are actually 3 burns. 2 of them concern the ATV. 1 of them does not. It comes about an hour after our broadcast. I don't think we're going to be here. But the lower composite has done its work now. The launcher reaching its targeted position for extinction of the main engine. Everything okay on board?
Yes, the EPS. The EPS is burning. It's used on this ES version for its capability to be reignited during the flight, and then to perform the 2 boosts which are necessary for the ATV mission before a third one, which will be the re-entry into the atmosphere and destruction of the upper stage, leaving no debris in space. But now we are listening to Jean-Jacques Dordain, Director General of ESA.
Johannes Kepler is the second ATV. Jules Verne was the first one. It was a great achievement. But this one is a production ATV, which makes a big difference, since it's the first of 4 to leave over a 1-year period. It's an exceptional and unique vehicle for ESA, because it's partly a launcher, a spacecraft, partly an orbiting infrastructure. And even though it's an automatic vehicle, it's compatible with a crewed infrastructure. It's also a unique vehicle for the station because it's the heaviest truck bringing freight on board and which automatically docks with the station with great accuracy. It's the outcome of a tremendous work undertaken in industry all over Europe under the leadership of Astrium in Bremen for the production part. It's also cooperation with partners, since we need all the partners of the station, especially the Russian partner, since we dock with the Russian part of the station. And indeed, it's also the outcome of the continuous support of all the member states. And I'd like to thank them all for their support and their patience for this exceptional event.
6 minutes left in the upper stage's first burn. Ariane performing flawlessly. You can see on the bottom left our altitude is 146 kilometers and our speed is 7.2 kilometers per second. Johannes Kepler, Alex, he gave his name to the mission tonight. Tell us a little bit about him.
He was born in 1571 in Germany. He's a contemporary of Nicolas Copernicus and Tycho Brahe. He's a German mathematician, astronomer, and astrologer, and a key figure of the 17th century scientific revolution. He has already proved himself at the age of 28 as being a superb mathematician and earned a reputation as a skillful astrologer as well.
And we're going to have a look at his 3 basic laws coming up. That's coming up a little bit later on. For now, another film on the ATV, a look about what it's carrying.
600 kilograms heavier than the Jules Verne, which had itself established a record, this second ATV is the heaviest spacecraft that Europe has ever launched. This is largely due to a performance increase of Ariane 5 with its new welded boosters, already used several times on Arianespace commercial flights. But the overall ATV capacity has been increased. The 8 internal racks of its cargo carrier section have been redesigned and optimized in weight and volume. Depending on ISS requirements and on solar activity, the average ATV loading turns around 6 tons. But the Johannes Kepler will do much better.
The current manifest is that we are uploading 7.1 ton. It will be fully loaded almost up to the last gram.
On this manifest, 1,600 kilograms of dry cargo. It includes 435 kilos of food, 70 of astronauts' belongings, ESA's geoflow experiment to study convective flow patterns of liquids, and spare parts for ESA's Columbus laboratory and for NASA's ISS modules. Also loaded 3 video cameras to be used for ESA physiology experiments and several liquid waste boxes to store non-reusable parts of the station's water system. And for public relations, a few stickers. Most of the dry cargo was loaded last September. However, this second ATV mission will make use for the first time of its late access ability. 28 different bags, some 430 kilograms, to be added at the last moment.
Since we have closed the back entrance of the ATV, the late cargo loading takes place in the final assembly hall. We will open the Russian docking system interface, and the person will descend into the ATV through the hatch, and then will stow these bags in their designated locations.
The bulk of the cargo, however, is propellant. Except for the water tanks remaining empty on this mission, the other reservoirs are brim full. 4.5 tons of propellant to reboost the ISS, 850 kilograms of fuels to transfer into the Russian FGB module, and 100 kilos of gases, air, oxygen and nitrogen. Everyone remembers the pictures of the streaking debris when the Jules Verne disintegrated as it plunged towards the Pacific Ocean. The perfectly controlled re-entry had been monitored and filmed by 2 aircraft. No aerial surveillance this time, but on its descent the Johannes Kepler will have an unusual passenger. A 4-kilogram, 30-centimeter diameter conical picosatellite will record and send back to Earth details of the breakup, recording the ultimate moments of the second ATV mission.